The Power Factor Show with Rick, Steve, and Caleb. Episode 33. Setting up a Level 2 USPSA match.
Gun Rights Radio Network has the best pro-Second Amendment, pro-gun rights podcast available on the net. The podcasts are absolutely free when subscribing using iTunes or Zune Marketplace. Or if you want, you can just listen from the website. Make sure you visit gunrightsradio.com to subscribe. Podcasting freedom, one episode at a time.
Brought to you by Safariland.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Power Factor. I'm Steve, and you'll notice Rick is not here. Today we're talking a little bit about how to set up a Level 2 USPSA match, and what we've got going on here is what's called the Northwest Challenge, and the Northwest Challenge is a Level 2 USPSA match. Now, we talked before about the difference of level matches, but just to reiterate, there's a Level 1 match, and a Level 1 match is typically like a club match. A club match is basically somewhat informal, but again, required to follow the rules in the rule book. All USPSA matches require that. However, there are what's called Level 1 exceptions, which we can talk about briefly here. Level 1 exceptions pretty much allow people to set up stages that are more than 32 rounds. The USPSA rulebook requires no more than 32 rounds for a normal Level 2 and above match, but a Level 1 match can exceed that. The other thing that Level 1 matches can do is, because of the fact that a lot of stages don't have enough props and the complexity to set up a match for a Level 1 match, they don't have the time to do it. They'll allow you to use shooting boxes. So you can set up a shooting box and say, engage these targets from shooting box A, and then engage only these targets from shooting box B. And you can also throw in mandatory reloads, and that's one of the things that you have what's called a Level 1 exception. The problem is, though, is that for a Level 2 match, basically the shooter is allowed to solve the problem as they are able to. And the requirement there is that the targets can be engaged as what's defined as an as-visible basis. So if you can see the targets, you can shoot the targets. And you cannot set up situations where you can say, only engage these targets through this port, or only engage these targets through at this box or whatever. Basically, if you can see it, you can shoot it. So because of that, all of a sudden now you really need to take more effort and more time and more complexity into setting up the stages to make sure that if you don't want a shooter to shoot something, you have to have walls to prevent them from shooting something from a given position. So that's really the primary difference between a Level 1 and a Level 2 in terms of course construction. Now, there's also what's called a Level 3 match, and the difference between a Level 2 and a Level 3 starts getting into the staff, basically whether they are approved range masters or approved ROs. For a Level 2 match, the range master or the person acting as a range master does not have to be an official NROI range master. For this particular match, I'm operating as range master, and I'm not actually a range master in terms of NROI approval. I am what's called a chief range officer, which is one level below range master. If it was a Level 3 match, you have to have a approved range master, honest to God range master for that match. And then for the actual ROs working the stages, they have to be, it's mandatory that they are US or NROI range officers, where for a Level 2, it's recommended that they're a NROI range officer. So that's some of the differences between a Level 2 and a Level 3. But the other requirement for a Level 2 match is that all the stages have to be approved by the head of NROI, which is John Amadon. So the process there is that you have to literally come up with all the stages, submit them to NROI for approval, and make sure that all the stages are compliant, and then set all the stages up. So in order to go ahead and do all this, in a normal like Level 1 or club match, a lot of times what happens in terms of setting the match up is that either the stages will get set up the morning of the match, or in some cases they may get set up the day before the match to work out all the bugs and stuff like that. A lot of people like to, when they come up with stage designs, they kind of like to have an idea in their head, and then they go and put it on the ground and move targets around and change their idea and this, that, and the other thing, and they finally end up with a stage that they like for the actual match. Unfortunately, that doesn't work for a Level 2, because a Level 2 requires that you have the stage on paper and it's submitted to the NROI prior to actually shooting the match. So there's a lot more effort that goes into and a lot more planning and everything. For this particular match, we actually started planning it back in, well, this match is in July, so we actually probably started planning it initially in January. And the first process there was the club president basically said, hey everybody, what do you guys think about putting on a level 2 match? Do we have enough people who are interested in doing this? Do we have the props? And again, for this type of a match, we've had to actually buy additional props. We've had to buy lumber, walls, things of that nature, materials to build these things up. So it's a certain amount of investment from the club standpoint to go ahead and put a match on like this. So you really have to have the buy-in and the commit from all the people who are involved. That it's not 10 people who are trying to put the match on. There's a lot of people who are actually involved in putting this match on, all the way from having an official chronograph, so you have people to run the chronograph. You have a match director who is different than the range master, who is really responsible for putting everything and coordinating all the people. He's really the field general in this case here, running everything and making sure that everything goes smoothly. You have basically stats people, you have an advertising group of people to basically get the word out, print up flyers, this and anything. A lot of times you'll advertise in the USPSA front site magazine, so there's people who are involved in that. Then you have to have somebody who's like a webmaster who ends up putting a web page together. We're being dealt with mosquitoes out here. It's late in the evening and they come out earlier at this time, so we're kind of getting eaten. But at any rate, so you have somebody who has to really be on top of that to be able to put the web page together, put a match app together, all the little things that you don't normally think about at a level 1 match. So you actually start looking at all this and all the planning that's involved for this. You can see that really the earlier you get going, the better. Now the other thing that you have the issues of then is squatting. So as people start submitting their match application saying that they want to shoot the match, you have to start squatting them all together. And now you run into a situation of, you have a certain number of stages, you have a certain amount of time. You're trying to run this match over, let's say, a day, or in this case, it's a day and a half. We have a 2-day match effectively going here. So you literally start looking at how many shooters per squad, clearance times, how long you think each shooter is going to take, how long it takes to reset the stage. You have your 5-minute walkthrough. This thing really gets down to a science, and there's actually Excel spreadsheets which will do some of this work for you. And you start trying to optimize basically your squad model to make sure that all the squads sequentially go through all the stages in a certain amount of time. And it seems like no matter what you do, you come up with one of these squad models and something breaks that you aren't taking into consideration. And also I should point out there's actually a person dedicated during the whole entire match to making sure that if something breaks, they're the guy who fixes it. I think they call it the quartermaster or something like that, but at any rate. So there are little things that get in the way during the match, and you need to react quickly, because if you don't, it just backs up that squad, which backs up the squad behind them, and it just runs into logistics problems throughout the whole entire match. So these are a lot of the things that you really need to take into consideration when setting up a level 2, which is considerably different than a level 1. A level 1 match, you don't really, yes, you have the squads, but you aren't so much really too much concerned about clearance times and trying to schedule things. And a level 2, things literally have to happen on time and really can't go much longer than what your expected time is, and you can't really build a buffer or too much of a buffer in, because that just extends the day. So you're limited to a certain number of people, and you need to know how many people you're dealing with in advance. So typically what they'll do is they'll set a cutoff limit or a cutoff time of when they'll accept people trying to sign up for the match. In our particular case, we've got a little bit of a buffer of around 20 or 30 shooters or so that we can deal with right now, so we can pretty much for the most part take shooters right up until the very last minute. So one of the other requirements, as we saw here, or we'll see, in terms of a match like this, is that you need to make sure that in the case of all the steel, that the steel is properly calibrated. So every day what we have to do is we have to take the designated match guns that are going to be used for verifying the chronograph and verifying the steel, and you take this supply of match ammunition and you first fire it over the designated match guns to make sure that it has a power factor of between, let's say, 112 and 125. And after you basically check that, you write the numbers down for that gun with the supply of ammunition that you're using. Basically, you just have a lot of ammunition that you designate for the whole entire match. And then you fire that over the chronograph and you check those numbers out. Those numbers from one day to the next day to the next day basically need to check to make sure that the chronograph isn't changing or anything of that nature. We're running 2 chronographs. We have one stage behind the other, so you really have a kind of another backup check there, that if the first chronograph goes, you've got the backup second one. If the two chronographs are within a certain percentage of each other, or a variance of each other, they're deemed to be in cal. So after you go and verify that the ammunition that you're using, your match ammo is in compliance, every day, the beginning of each day, or the end of each day, depending on when you want to do it, you have to go through and check every single steel popper to make sure that it will go over or fall when shot with the official match ammunition. And that's basically just to make sure that all the steel is properly set at the beginning, basically the beginning of each day of shooting during the match. Now, the other issue comes in is that, let's say if a shooter ends up shooting a steel popper and it doesn't go down, you have three choices that the shooter can do, basically from their standpoint. They can shoot it again and drop it. They can basically not shoot it and take the mic, or they can then what's called challenge the steel. And in challenging the steel, what happens is after they shoot it, the RO will ask them, do you want to challenge that? And here's a word to all you viewers. Generally speaking, if you ever shoot a steel popper and it doesn't go down, it is in your best interest. I mean, you can either shoot it again and take the time to do that, but if you're absolutely certain that you hit that thing and you see the mark on that popper is within what's defined as the calibration zone and it doesn't go down, your choices are either take the mic or challenge it. If you challenge it and it goes down, you're going to get a mic on the target. If you challenge it and it doesn't go down, then you get a reshoot. So you can see basically there that you're in a situation of, if you do nothing, you get a mic, but if you challenge it and you win, you may get a reshoot, but if you challenge it and you lose, you still get the same mic as if you didn't challenge it. So my recommendation is, generally speaking, always challenge steel that doesn't go down. So assuming you do challenge the steel, what happens is the RO will come out with the designated match gun, and usually there's one or two, just in case one breaks, you've got a backup, with the designated match ammo, and they will come out and shoot the steel popper from the exact position that you shot it and it didn't fall. And the requirement is that the target, the steel popper, has to be hit in the calibration zone or below, and if it goes down, you lose the challenge. If you hit the popper, if the round hits the popper in that calibration area and stands, then you win the challenge. If they hit the popper above the calibration zone, whether it stands or falls, you win, because it has to be within that area. If you hit it high, you effectively have more leverage on the popper. So generally speaking, that's the other use of all the match ammo, of how it's used throughout the match, to check the chronograph and also calibrate the steel, and also set up to deal with situations where shooters want to challenge the steel. So what happens typically in a level 2 match is it's desirable to have all the ROs be the same RO in each stage, so you don't have what's called a roving RO. And from a stage equality standpoint, that's really good, because you have the same RO interpreting the course of fire the same way for every single squad that comes through. Well, to do that pretty much means now that the ROs are not shooting the match during the match, they need to shoot the match prior to the match. So what will happen here is that the ROs, all the staff, range master, match director, people in stats, running the chrono, all the ROs or whatever, will shoot the match typically the day before the rest of the competitors shoot the match. The match officially technically starts when the staff starts shooting it. So any of the competitors can come out and look at the stages and observe them and observe the RO shooting them and game the stages and stuff like that. But at any rate, all the staff will shoot the match typically the day before the match, all the stages. So in this case here, we're shooting 12 stages in one day, which is going to make for a very long day. And I can probably let you know that probably with the time stage 8 rolls around, I'll probably have had enough of the match and, and I wish it was over. But at any rate, hopefully I'll be able to keep my head in it during the whole entire match. Just to give you a little backup, I haven't actually shot a match since I shot the Double Tap Championship, which we've already talked about. So for me, I've got about a 6-week hiatus that I actually haven't been shooting pistol at all, so we'll see how that goes. I'm also going to be using my new Safariland 031 holster out, which we got from Bobby. So it's going to be a good test of that. Got some comments about that hopefully here that I can give in the future. I did have one issue which I can talk about later, and it was really not a problem, but Safariland changed the design of their inner outer belt system. I have a really old one. They've changed to a much better design. However, because of that changeover, I had to get kind of a different part for my holster, but at any rate, that's a future episode. So at any rate, so the staff will shoot the match all in one day, and then we'll be geared up for shooting everybody else over the next 2 days. And the plan is that we will start roughly at 9 o'clock in the morning and finish roughly about 5 o'clock in the evening. So as I mentioned before, I'm going to be operating as range master in this particular match. The range master has ultimate authority over everything that happens in the match. So if you have a scoring problem, if you have a shooting or shooter problem, if there's some sort of a challenge on something, initially the challenge goes to the RO on the stage, or I'm sorry, the RO on the stage, then it will go to the chief RO on the stage, and if the competitor still has a grievance, then it goes up to the range master. But basically the range master is the ultimate, final decision, unless the shooter decides to arb the issue. And an arbitration happens then is that the shooter has to then notify the match director that they have to notify the range master that they are filing an arbitration. It has to be done within 1 hour of whatever happened. And typically arbitrations usually happen as a result of a shooter getting DQ'd for one reason or another. And then what they're trying to do is basically state that what happened, they can't say what happened and didn't happen. You can't say, well, I didn't fire a round over the berm. They can't say that, but they have to basically come up with some sort of a argument of it went over the berm or whatever because of this, and it wasn't my fault, and therefore I should be reinstated, something along those lines. So at any rate, hopefully we won't have any arbitration issues. I've never sat on an arbitration panel, however. During my CRO course, you had to do 2 arbitration exercises, which was rather interesting. But at any rate, so range master really has ultimate authority over everything, and to be honest, I can tell you that a happy range master will be a completely bored range master. It's kind of like the Maytag repairman, that if I'm bored and sitting around and doing nothing, I will be perfectly happy. But if I'm running around doing stuff, that's usually a sign that maybe things weren't thought through very well, or somebody has gamed something, or somebody is trying to challenge something that something wasn't clearly spelled out in the course description and everything. And that's part of also my job, is that in interfacing with NROI, I looked over all these stages, and we have a book of stages here for everything for the match, and I've gone over these stages with a fine-tooth comb, basically looking for any loopholes, any problems, anything where somebody could try to game their way around a stage or try to argue a certain point or something like that. So hopefully if I've done all my work in advance, we won't have any problems that are going to pop up like that. What we do before the match is that the staff will go through and walk every single stage and look at everything with a very close eye to make sure that, first off, from a safety standpoint, that the targets aren't set such that a round can leave the range, or a round will bounce off a rock or something like that. But we're also looking for potential loopholes where a competitor will go off and do something that you weren't expecting. And actually, from walking the stages today, we found a couple little small things where a competitor might go and try to do something that you weren't expecting. And as a result of that, we can now go back and modify to what's called the stage walkie. And a stage walkie is literally what's called the written stage briefing that is read to every single competitor, and is really the final documentation that tells them what they can and can't do. So we can pencil some things in there if something needs to be changed at the very last minute. And that's the other kind of advantage of the staff shoot, is that even though we've all gone and looked at the stages today and watched everything to make sure that hopefully they're okay, sometimes you just don't know until you actually start firing rounds and see something done. And you'll see something done and you go, oh, nobody expected that, nobody anticipated that, but let's fix it now before all the competitors get here and discover it there. Because your biggest fear is that a competitor goes and challenges a stage. Let's say they file an arbitration on a stage, and the stage has to get removed, or what's called tossed from the match. So all of a sudden, you have a stage that is either deemed to be illegal, or something has changed in the stage, and you have what's called an inequality situation, where all the people who have shot it before have shot it, and the stage changes for one reason or another, and now all of a sudden the people who shot it before are not shooting it the same way as the people have afterwards. And if it's a significant enough of a change, and you can't go and get everybody who has already shot the stage to go through and reshoot it all over again, so that you have an equality situation. Your only choice at that point is to throw the stage, and nobody wants to throw a stage. And it's even worse where you're a competitor and you go and shoot the stage and you do really, really well on it, like let's say you come in first or second or whatever, and then all of a sudden, you know, that stage gets tossed. It's not going to make you very happy. What would make you happy is that if you shoot that stage and you have 16 mics and, you know, and you zero the stage and they toss the stage, it's like, you know, thank you. But, you know, the desire is to not throw any stages whatsoever. So that's what we're really protecting against here, is to try to make sure that there are no, you know, gotchas or missed opportunities for somebody to go off and do something, because the fear is we don't want to have any problems like that. We don't want to have any problems at all, but the biggest fear really from a range master standpoint, other than safety issues, is having a stage arbed and tossed. You just don't want to go there. So at any rate.
More targets back here. Okay. That's my concern. More to shoot? Back too far, you're gonna. Okay.
Got another 3 targets on each side.
Oh, so okay, this is 6 rounds. Yeah. 18. Just step off of it. Okay.
So do you like that there, Lisa?
What's to say you can't even just...
And then finish. Yeah. Yeah, that works too. Oh, we gotta
Lisa
nail
just
it down.
Lisa just found the weakness.
Yeah, we gotta
Doesn't have a leg on.
Well, you don't have an E-spike down here.
So we're caling steel right now for the Northwest Challenge, and the requirement on caling steel is basically all the poppers have to be shot from the distance that they're available to be shot at on the course of fire, whether it happens to be where the competitor shoots it from or not. So in this case here, the course of fire starts at this point here, and I'm probably a good 25 yards from the steel down there. So we need to make sure that the steel can fall if shot from this position here. So hopefully I'll be able to hit it. That one. So other than missing that one target, both of those two steel calibrate correctly. Now the other thing is that you also have to hit them in the calibration zone, so you can't go high. If you go low and it falls, it's okay, but it should be at least in the calibration zone and down in order to properly pass cal. So we'll go cal a couple more. Okay, so the ammo that we're using for calibration, the ammo has to achieve, or it says it should achieve, a power factor of, I believe, 112 to 125. So the idea is that if it falls with this ammo, that it will definitely fall with somebody who's shooting minor, because minor is 125 and up. So what we need to do is basically cal all the steel with ammunition that is actually slightly below the minimum power floor, in this case 125. This stuff has been chronoed through a Glock 17 and is running at about 120. I'm shooting this with my Glock 19, which means I'm probably around the 117 or so. So what we actually need to do in terms of having the official ammunition, but you also need to have officially designated firearms that you're caling the ammunition with. So what we're going to do tomorrow is then run this ammunition over my Glock 19 and find out exactly what the power factor is with that, to make sure that it falls below 125, around between 112 and 125. Now the interesting thing there is that the rule book says should, not shall. So, you know, if you're running at a 111 or whatever, there's nothing that says that you can't continue using that, but it really should be up around the correct area. The other thing that you need to do, and the reason that we fired it over the test or the official guns, is that every day you need to make sure that your calibration ammo fired over the chrono is consistent every day from day to day to day. And that tells you not only your gun is okay, but it also tells you your chrono is working or consistently from one day to the next day. That's one of the requirements, basically, is that the chronos have to basically stay calibrated throughout the entire match.
So this particular stage here is actually, looks like a lot of fun to me. It's a good representation of a lot of creative thinking. What we have here is a block of targets and the infamous Texas Star that everybody knows and loves very well. The Texas Star can't be engaged until a port is open, and the port is open only by hitting one of two what's called pepper poppers. So the course start position here is standing in the shooting area with your hands on the X's. Now again, because of the fact that this is all freestyle and you can't tell the competitor what to do, they're standing in front of the X's, but there's targets over here. Of course you can't see them right now because they've been taken down, but there's target stands here you can see where you can go. So you can start here and step over and shoot, or what I'm going to do when I shoot this is I'm going to actually get myself staged over as far as possible on this thing so I'm directly looking at these targets. So I'll get myself positioned here at the start signal, draw, and I'll shoot these 3 targets here. Now the other thing I'm going to do is to take advantage of the fact that I want to go that way. Rather than shooting the targets left to right, I'm going to shoot the targets right to left and back up as I'm coming out of here on this last target here to get myself into the next shooting position. So I'll go bam, 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 moving this way. What some people will do is first start here, step over, go blam, 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 and then move. So again, in terms of economy of motion and trying to do 2 things at once, I'm going to try to get out of this position here and get moving on to the next position, backing up while I'm shooting this target. My next shooting position, after I come through this door here, I can either go left or I can go right. But since I'm looking through here, I'm looking straight into a group of 2 targets that are over here. So as I come through this port here, I'm going to shoot these 2 targets that are here. Now what you can't quite see, but if you step over here, is there's a pepper popper down here on the right hand side, and there's another similar one over on the left hand side, and that pepper popper will open up this port here. But this pepper popper is only visible from this side of the wall looking down. You can't see it from anywhere else in here. There's also another pepper popper over here that opens the port. Either one will trip the port open, but that one can only be seen from this side over here also. So after I shoot on this side over here, I'm going to come in, hit these 2 targets, hit that popper, and then basically take a very wide single step, come over and hit that popper there. At that point, I'm going to come down range, possibly do a reload because I've been doing some shooting. This port will then be open. And through this port, I have a Texas Star with 5 steel plates on it, which hopefully when I shoot it won't be spinning very much. 2 targets to the right, 2 targets to the left. So you're looking at this thing here, I've got 13 rounds through this port here. My magazines hold roughly 19 or 20 rounds, and I've already fired what looks to be a magazine's worth. We'll just call it a magazine's worth up here. So I'll definitely be doing a reload coming into this port. Now, because of the fact that I have magazine capacity, I can shoot all these targets here from a single position. But somebody who's shooting production or somebody who's shooting, say, single stack is not going to have 13 rounds to go fire through a single port here. So they're going to want to pick these 2 side targets up somewhere else. The requirement in USPSA is that you can have no more than 8 rounds from what's called a single position or view. Okay, so the next thing you're going to say, well, gee, Steve, you just violated that rule because you're firing 13 rounds through here. Aha! If you back up and look over here, not only can I shoot that pepper popper here, in fact, that's the only thing I can shoot, but those 2 targets that I talked about shooting through the middle can be shot from over here. They can be seen from here, they can be seen from the middle. But splitting them up basically then says that you can shoot effectively through the middle port here, the 5 plates on the Texas Star, and shoot the 2 paper from over here, or in my case, or if you want to do a static reload, you can shoot the whole entire thing from the port there. If I was shooting this from a production or from a single stack standpoint, I would definitely shoot those targets from this position here. There's no point in doing a static reload. You have to come here anyway. The fact that you have to come here, you might as well do as much as you can here to avoid the static reload from somewhere else. So my guess is anybody who's shooting production, after they come over here, after shooting the group of targets back here, is they'll shoot these 2 targets here, those 2 targets there, the steel, that's 9 rounds. A single stack guy is going to go basically slide lock at that point. But he has enough room moving over here to do a slide lock reload, which is really not all that big of a deal. Shoots the 2 paper targets there, the steel, that's 5, then does his other reload, comes in and shoots the 5 rounds at the Texas Star. Pretty straightforward, not a whole lot of movement, but still it's fairly tight, and it's kind of nice in that I have a fairly long stride when I'm moving around a course of fire, and it seems like for me everything here is almost like 1 to 2 steps. I mean, literally, I'll be doing this. I'll be going this, that, steel, rock over, steel here, and then just a few steps going forward. So I'm actually looking forward to shooting this stage. It looks like a lot of fun. But that's just like one of the many stages here. We have 12 stages in this match. Some of them are these types of courses of fire where you're moving around. Texas Stars, plate racks, Rick's favorite. We all know how well he loves plate racks or steel in general. But at any rate, some of them are a lot more confined where you have targets right in front of you and you don't have a whole lot of movement. Other ones have a lot of movement where you're going, you know, we saw back earlier where I was shooting those 2 poppers from the long distance on calibrating them. Well, you've got roughly 20 yards that you got to move down there while holding a bag in your hand, shooting targets strong hand only. So that's going to be a bit of a challenge for some people. So there's a good mix of what I would say speed stages where you're really tight and confined, and movement where you're doing a lot of running and stuff like that. Everybody likes, generally speaking, everybody likes high round count, large courses of fire. But the problem is that if you make a match of 12 stages of high round count courses of fire, you're not only going to have a situation where your match count is going to be very high. I mean, this match count's like 250 some rounds for 12 stages, but if you do the math of 12 stages times 30, I mean, that's a lot of rounds, and people aren't usually expecting that. Not only that, the time to reset each stage and to have each shooter shoot each stage is going to take very long, and that makes your day even longer. So you really need to have a balance of small stages and large stages to make up an entire match, and then you have a whole entire problem of making sure that you don't have a very fast stage followed by a very slow stage, because that just creates bottlenecks. So there's even more issues there that you really need to take into consideration. So that's about it. Hope you guys have enjoyed the program of looking into what it takes to put together a level 2 match. I'll let you know how my duties of range master go in a future episode. Hopefully I'll have a very boring tale to tell, and nothing will have happened, so we'll see how all that goes. So again, thanks for tuning into the program. Have any questions about any of this, you can send us an email at powerfactorshow@gmail.com. You can also go to the Facebook page, and it looks like we've been getting a lot of hits there from a lot of people recently. I imagine the Safariland holster has a little bit to do with that, but at any rate, and you can hit the website as always at powerfactorshow.com. So thanks for tuning in, and next time Rick will be here. And I think actually what Rick is going to do is do a similar perspective of an IDPA match, the Washington State IDPA match, so he can kind of take you through all the preparation and the match management issues for that. And I think you're probably going to find that the two are very similar in terms of preparation and staffing and all the problems that you run into with all that. So, all right, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you soon.